Okay, so here we are. We are live once again with another DC Multiverse unboxing, and this is Batman from JLA, from Grant Morrison's run on JLA, from Howard Porter's run on JLA. One of the best runs of Justice League comics I ever read. It was a funny story about Justice League, as far as I'm concerned. It is like my first introduction to the Justice League, like a lot of people my age, would have actually been the classic Saturday morning cartoon series, Super Friends. And Super Friends was, it was based on the Justice League comics, but it was kind of, a little more kid friendly, I guess you'd say. It was a little more sort of, less violent and more about like, getting along with everybody kind of thing, if that makes any sense. So the first season of it didn't even really have any proper bad guys in it. It was just like, the Super Friends go up against some kind of misguided scientist who meant well, and Wendy and Marvin and Wonder Dog got most of the screen time, and I wasn't really too into those episodes. I thought those were kind of boring, honestly, and I get a lot of flack for that from like the older fans, and I know that's all you had at the time, so of course you got some nostalgia goggles for it, but it just did not do it for me. Now, when I came into the show, it was the all new Super Friends hour, and they were starting to get a little more like the comic book. Super Friends was even through Galactic Guardians, which is like where the series was at its most serious. It was always at least kind of goofy in that Saturday morning sort of way, but I didn't care. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it, especially in those last seasons when Adam West took over as the voice of Batman. I loved that. But by the time I started seriously reading comic books, the Justice League was not what it once was. For one thing, Batman had left the team to form the Outsiders, and not long afterwards, they actually disbanded the entire Justice League and reformed it as what's commonly known these days as Justice League Detroit. I don't think that was ever the official actual name of it, but it was what fans wound up calling it. Not exactly the most successful iteration of Justice League. So after Crisis, they had their superstar Keith Giffen, who'd kicked all kinds of ass on Legion of Superheroes. They had him come in and revamp the Justice League with the caveat that again he couldn't use any of the flagship members. He couldn't have Superman. He couldn't have Wonder Woman. He couldn't have Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. Well, you can use Guy Gardner. We'll let you use Batman a little bit, but that's about as best we could do. So he had to make do. He and his partners in crime, J.M. DeMatteis, a very talented comic book writer in his own right, wrote one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, the Kraven's Last Hunt saga, and Kevin McGuire, a fantastic artist. They kind of reinvented Justice League as Justice League International, and it was more of a comedy type of book. But they were able to use a lot of these characters, like not so much the marquee players, but solid characters like Blue Beetle and Booster Gold and the aforementioned Guy Gardner, and Dr. Fate was in there for a little bit. And, they were able to parlay it into something special. But sooner or later, it just ran out of steam. And Justice League kind of floundered for a little bit. And I know for a long time it was written by Dan Jurgens, and he did some good stuff with it. And then it was written by somebody who shall not be named at all, a total scumbag. You can look that up yourself if you want to, but don't look for it, Taylor. You may not like what you find. Anyway, that run of Justice League wasn't very successful. The Dan Jurgens stuff had done all right, especially towards the end there when they tied in with Death of Superman. But it was about time for another revamp. And Grant Morrison had a pitch. And of course, they were well known for various works at Vertigo. They'd done Animal Man, and they'd done Arkham Asylum, which was, a Batman comic, but it was the Batman comic edited by Karen Berger and illustrated by Dave McKeon. So it's about as Vertigo as you can get, really. So he hadn't really done a whole lot of mainstream superhero stuff. Really, the early days of Animal Man was as close as he got. And but they had a pitch about Justice League, and the idea was like this crazy idea. It's like, hey, let's bring back all the marquee players. Let's have Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and The Flash and Green Lantern. Okay, you can't use Hal Jordan because we're about to make him into a serial killer. But, you know, you can use Kyle Rayner. You can use him. You got Aquaman, Martian Manhunter. So you've got all 7 of the founding members of the Justice League finally back together. Asterisks because it's Wally West and Kyle Rayner instead of Barry Allen and Hal Jordan. But y'all know Wally's better than Hal anyway. So I just triggered some Silver Age fans there. So yeah, great epic Justice League run leading up to the year 2000 and the new millennia, and a lot of cool, fun stuff there. And Morrison had written Batman before and Arkham Asylum, and they had no problem getting into character for this. Now, from what Morrison says, his intention with Arkham Asylum was to write kind of a broken Batman that would be torn down and rebuilt. He was trying to, take the kind of psycho Batman that had been prevalent in comics around that time and bring him back to his roots, as they put it, the hairy-chested love god that Neil Adams drew. That was the Batman that he wanted to do. They wanted to do. I keep doing that. I'm sorry. So anyway, what we had was, I remember reading the first issue of that book, and Batman doesn't show up until the last page. And as soon as Batman shows up, it's a Batman comic. So I can see why they decided it would be a good idea to keep Batman out of the book until the very end of it, because then he just dominates the whole story afterwards. And that's why a lot of people kind of accuse Morrison's Batman of being, Bat God and being infallible. But they were often able to write a Batman with some vulnerability, and Batman could be defeated, and at least temporarily. But he always comes back. That's what the character of Batman's all about. Batman is not supposed to be a character that is defined by his defeats. He's defined by his victories. And some people still need to learn that lesson, I guess. I don't know. But we've already seen the artwork for this. Here's all the cross-cell artwork on the back. If you haven't watched the other 2 videos in the series, for shame, go back and watch them. Plastic Man. And we're going to put together Plastic Man right now. Isn't that exciting? So we can see that Batman comes with 2 different Plastic Man heads. Both of these heads do, to me, resemble Howard Porter's artwork somewhat. Now, there is one complaint that I will make about these heads. It applies to both of them. And it's because they did a little too much here. You see that it's got that kind of reflection on the goggles, as Plas is often drawn in the comics, to have that little reflection on his goggles. But they didn't just paint it on. No. This is actually sculpted on to the lens. It's supposed to be a reflection. You don't sculpt a reflection, you just paint it on. But oh well. So we got 2 different heads here. There's no articulation at the neck. The only articulation will be where it meets the shoulder. So we'll put this one on first so we can see what it looks like. So there's that, but that's not the one I'm going to leave on there. I'm going to leave this stretchy necked version on there. That's going to be my Plastic Man. So yeah, it would be nice if it had another joint here at the top of the neck, but whatever. It's still pretty cool. So the next figure I will open in this wave will be Aquaman. He's going to come with the plain arms. So we'll see what the plain arms look like on him when we get those. But for now, we're just going to have the stretchy arms on him. So this is his right arm. I'm making sure because it's, I don't want to get it mixed up. And since this arm is on there, kind of like a lasso, it's not exactly as easy to figure out as you might think. And this other one with the hand itself all stretched out, and that's the left hand. So let's go ahead and pop that on. Now, when we get the normal arms, those should have more articulation to them. So whenever I get Aquaman, we'll talk about those normal arms some. But here's Plastic Man entirely put together, and he's got this lasso arm so that he can lasso bad guys. Unfortunately, I feel like it's a little short. It probably would have helped if it was a little longer. But still, we can use it to lasso, say, the Riddler, snag him around the neck, snag him around the arm. It's not quite big enough to go around his whole torso or his whole waist, but you can still get some pretty good poses out of that, I think. So yeah, I might do a video talking about Plastic Man later on. I still haven't even done the one on the anti-monitor I keep meaning to do, but I'm pretty happy with Plastic Man so far. Just stay tuned. I might do another video about him. So let's move on to Batman himself. And before we get to the figure, we'll go ahead and get this stuff out of the back of the package. And we have the standard DC Multiverse figure stand in matte plastic with a glossy DC logo embossed on there in black. Pretty basic, but, you know, effective. I always like the design. I feel like there's an elegance in its simplicity. And then the trading card is on a separate bubble. And, of course, this one's wanting to pull the entire cardboard off, making it difficult for me to get to. This is why I like to have the stand and the card on one bubble. It makes that a lot easier. And there we have, you can see the where the all black coloring came from, because I think they did a better job of making this particular uniform a solid black than they did in the actual Batman comics of the time. You see it's all got a blue highlight over it, so it looks nice and black. That's what the back of the card looks like, and it reads, Batman, JLA, data file, real name Bruce Wayne, a billionaire playboy by name. Bruce Wayne's double life affords him the comfort of a life without financial worry, a loyal butler turned guardian, and the perfect base of operations in the ancient network of caves sprawling beneath his family's sprawling estate. By night, however, he sheds all pretense, dons his iconic scalloped cape and pointed cowl, and takes to the shadowy streets, skies, and rooftops of Gotham City. So there we go. That's Batman. All right. So we've been over the legend. Now let's go over the man himself. I'm just gonna break these rubber tabs. And he comes with this grappling hook launcher. We've seen this grappling hook launcher before. It's I believe this is the same one that came with the Walmart exclusive blue and gray Batman that was the first Morrison, the first Mcfarlane, sorry. The first Mcfarlane Batman figure I ever got. I think that might have been early enough that I didn't do a review of it. So there's double rubber tab at the torso, rubber tab at each elbow, rubber tab at each ankle. And now that I've cut the rubber tabs, I can stealthily and with no noise whatsoever pull the figure out of the package. You see how nobody would have heard that at all. I'm so stealthy. All right. Go ahead and take this and put it back into the box. There we go. I will take that down to the recycling later. So no further need of it. Actually, I can put that end at the bottom. That way I can make sure it gets flattened. It won't get caught on anything. Looks like I spoke too soon. There we go. I got it now. All right. So, Batman. Now, we've seen this Batman before. And I know I've opened this one on this very show. Where did I put him? Because I know I had that over here. There's the Arkham Batman. Here we go. So this Batman is a straight-up repaint of the Three Jokers version of Batman. And we're going to go over some of the differences. Some are more obvious than others. But the most obvious difference, I think, is that this Batman is in a black and gray costume, and this Batman is in a solid black costume. And they've also done a blue and gray version of this that's in a large multi-pack of figures that I believe was an Amazon exclusive. There's also like just a slight bit of difference on the face paint, whereas the JLA Batman has slightly darker lips. It's not really noticeable until you hold them next to each other. And also the paint applications on the emblem are different. because we can see that this one has a black ring around the emblem, and this one, the ring is still painted in yellow. And also, the bat itself is painted slightly different. It's sculpted the same, but this one is painted in such a way where the scallops at the bottom of the emblem are a little sharper, a little more pointy, and these, you can see the scallops are a little bit more rounded. So this one looks a little bit more like, I think, how Michael Keaton's Batman emblem looked, and this one looked a little bit more like how it looked in the actual comics. And besides the black coloring for the bodysuit, you can also see that the gray version has a little bit of a darker shade of yellow on the emblem and the belt, and this one it's a little brighter, probably to give it just that much more contrast with the black outfit. And I really like Jason Fabok's design for Batman's costume and Three Jokers. You can see how it's almost kind of like a mashup of the Ben Affleck type of Batman costume, like if you look at the cowl and the black and gray look of it. But it's also got a lot of elements of the Michael Keaton one, like with the emblem and the belt buckle, very Keaton-esque, and of course the ribbed texture on the shin guards there. So I always thought it would be pretty cool to have another one of these painted in black. And I do have an extra one I was going to use for a custom. And originally I was going to do a blue and gray one, but then they put out that multi-pack, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll get that one day, and I won't need to do that. So maybe I'll just paint this one all black. Well, now I don't need to do that, do I? So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that Batman at this point. Maybe I'll do him in gold and do Tech Shield Batman. Who knows? But yeah, he looks really sharp with the all black deco. I think it looks really cool. If you really wanted to, I suppose somebody could take the figures apart and swap out the trunks so that this gray Batman could have black trunks. But to me, it seems like it'd be easier just to paint it if you really wanted to do that. And wouldn't he look weird with gray trunks? You don't want to do that. So let's go over the articulation. Batman can look up that far, and he can look down about that far. He can tilt his head kind of quizzically from side to side, move his head around in a lot of different ways. Unfortunately, there is, while there's a good ball joint at the base of the neck, there's actually not one in between the neck and the head, probably because they didn't want to interfere with the lines of the cowl, which is understandable. So the arms rotate all the way around at the shoulder. The cape does kind of hinder that somewhat, since it does kind of come over the shoulders a little bit. Raise his arms up about that far. He does have a bicep swivel, so the bicep rotates all the way around. He's got double jointed elbows. That's about the range of motion you get on the elbows. He's got the cool Mcfarlane wrist articulation, where you can move his wrists around pretty much whichever way you want to. He's got one solid fist on the left hand and one gripping hand on the right hand. He's got that cool Mcfarlane torso articulation, so we can move him around a whole bunch of different ways at the waist and the beneath the rib cage. Really good articulation there. He can kick up about that far, so good range of motion on those legs. It is slightly hindered by that rubber trunk piece, but not too much, not more than a little bit less, I think, than you might expect. But he can kick up pretty far, actually. Got the double jointed knees. That's about the range of articulation you have on the knees. No boot cut, but he does have the cool Mcfarlane ankle articulation, so we can move his ankles around whichever way we want to. Really cool figure, really happy with this. Now you'll notice, since this is based on an older version of Batman, this is a repaint of an earlier figure, he does have a plastic cape rather than the fabric capes that Mcfarlane tends to be leaning towards these days. Personally, I like the fabric capes, but I don't mind this plastic cape. I think it's fine. Maybe that might have been a little something where they could have added a little more value, though, to what basically is a repaint figure, is to give him a fabric cape, and that way it would differentiate him a little bit more from the Three Jokers Batman that we already have. Now, technically, I think that it would have been more appropriate to use the Nightfall Batman sculpt, since that is supposed to be a vanilla Batman from the early 90s. And I think that they still ought to do an all-black version of that eventually. But I'm not going to complain that they use this Fabok version. Fabok is my favorite of the modern Batman artists, and I really like his stuff. and I will always be happy to have another Jason Fabok Batman figure. And like I said, I always felt like this would be a really cool figure to have in an all black color scheme anyway, and I am proven correct in that assumption. So he looks really neat. A very early '90s kind of Batman, I think, at least well mid '90s more like. It does fit in with the, even though it's drawn to or sculpted like Jason Fabok's artwork. It does look enough like I think Howard Porter's art that it won't look too out of place. You might want to forgive it for having that Keaton-esque belt buckle and the texture to the boots, since he didn't have that in the comics at the time. But I wouldn't have minded if he did, honestly. So that's pretty much it for JLA Batman. I definitely recommend it, especially if you want to, have a set of figures that represents the Justice League as they were in the comics during that time period. A very exciting time period for this comic book reader. So I'm glad to have this. I'm glad to have this era of the comic book represented. This is, to me, one of the best runs of Justice League comics ever. Maybe my personal favorite run of Justice League comics ever. So that's pretty much it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe. All the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this figure and Batman in general, and also Grant Morrison's run on Justice League. I was really impressed with what they did there. So next episode, we're going to do As-Bats. Azrael Batman armor from Batman Night's End. That's going to be our next figure. He's pretty cool looking, huh? All right, we're going to tune out now. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time. Bye.